I was whisking buttercream like it owed me money when my phone lit up with her name, Vanessa, big and bright across the screen. I answered without thinking, smiling like an idiot because I'd been planning this whole surprise from the minute I clocked out, a 3-layer red velvet with vanilla frosting and a thin ribbon of strawberry jam exactly the way she'd once said she loved it, and I went, "Hey, Ness, you done for the day?" "Cake's almost," and her voice cut through me, cool and businesslike. "Ethan Brooks, if the cake's ready, deliver it to this address," followed by a location pin that hit me right in the gut, downtown, Ryan Mitchell's condo near Grandview Mall, polished steel and glass, valet umbrellas at the door like the weather wasn't even allowed to touch money like his, and for a beat I forgot how to breathe because we'd said we'd celebrate together tonight, just the two of us, and I'd even set out her favorite candles. "Deliver it where?" I asked like an idiot, repeating the obvious, clinging to this idea we were still a we, and Vanessa sighed, impatient and unimpressed. "I changed my mind. We're doing it at Ryan's. It's easier for him." "Don't be dramatic, Ethan, just bring the cake," and then the line went dead, her hang-up tone like a flat line in my ear, and if you've ever had your heart scooped out with a spoon and told to smile, that was me standing in my tiny Willow Creek apartment's kitchen with a perfect cake and zero dignity. Outside the windows, Los Angeles was doing that big, theatrical rain we pretend doesn't happen here. The streets below turned to liquid chrome, taillights smearing into red commas as if they were pausing to judge me, and I wrapped the cake like a newborn, double-boxed with a cardboard collar so it wouldn't slide, taped the corners, then grabbed my jacket and jogged for the elevator because of course my car, which leaks when it sneezes, was one hydroplane away from a freeway cartoon. I called a ride, waited under the awning while the storm slapped the sidewalk, thinking stupid thoughts like maybe she wanted me there, maybe it was a surprise, maybe she finally remembered New Year's when we promised no more Ryan emergencies, no more his voice sounds weak at midnight so she bolts and I'm left with the leftovers of our life. The driver pulled up, a kind guy who pretended not to notice the way I held the box like a life raft. And 15 minutes later we slid to a stop in front of Ryan's building, one of those places with concierge and statement art that looks like expensive confusion, and the second I opened the car door the rain punched me in the head, hood up, jacket useless, shoes filling with cold water as I hustled past a brass plaque that probably cost more than my monthly rent. At the door I fumbled with the buzzer, but before I pressed it I heard it, muffled and warm through the panel like a scene from a life that wasn't mine. A man's gentle tenor bright with attention, "Happy birthday to you," and a woman's laugh I knew down to its last breathy curl, her voice softened into a version of herself she never used on me, "You always make the wish for me," and his answer, "Syrup sweet, then I'll make them all yours." And I stood with rain drilling my shoulders and a cake soaking up humidity it didn't deserve, realizing I had brought my own humiliation like a door prize. Inside, their voices braided with clinking glasses, the neatly curated happiness of people who thought the world existed to pose for them. Outside, I pressed my forehead to cool stone because it kept me from shaking and told myself to ring the bell anyway if she asked. I'd do it, because that's what I do, I deliver, I stay useful, I don't make a scene. And then I heard Ryan ask, lightly puzzled, "Where's the cake?" Didn't Ethan bring it, like I was the house staff or a food app? And Vanessa, composed again, "He's probably just being slow, it's pouring," and that word slow hit me in the spine, the kind of word that turns a man to furniture, and my hand went slack and the box slipped, caught, slipped again, and then it smashed into the step with a dull, wet thud, buttercream exploding against the rain in a sad white star. I didn't ring. I didn't pick it up. I just turned and walked, then ran, then half stumbled into the storm, not seeing the curb until it kicked my shin and not caring because the cold was a mercy. By the time I reached the curb to call another ride my teeth were knocking like I was trying to code a message, and the driver who eventually took me home kept asking if I needed a hospital, and I kept saying, "I'm fine," because men say that until we're not. Back in my apartment, every movement cost interest I couldn't afford, jacket off, shoes off, wet socks peeled away like regret, then the room tilted hard, the AC's whisper turned mean, and I had to brace on the counter just to stay upright. My phone screen fogged beneath my shaking thumb as I tried to unlock it, failing twice before I finally called her, because even after everything, even after midnight phone calls from Ryan and the wedding night she left me for his anxiety, even after the promises that dissolved like sugar in hot water, She was still the number I'd memorized before my social, ringing, 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 and then her voice, "Where is the cake, Ethan?" like I was a bad employee, and I croaked, "Vanessa, I don't feel head, cold, can you?" then coughed so hard I thought something tore, and all she heard was a man she'd decided was dramatic, so she said, "Don't start. If you didn't want to come, just say so. I'm with Ryan," and the click at the end scissored the last thin thread holding me up. The floor rushed in, black at the edges, and somewhere very far away I remember a door, hands, a voice that wasn't hers saying, "Hey, can you hear me? Stay with me," and then nothing. When I came back, the light was hospital bright, the air smelled like antiseptic and citrus, and a calm voice was saying my name like it belonged to me, "Ethan, you're okay. You're at St. Mary's. I'm Dr. Emily Lawson, your neighbor across the hall," and her face sharpened into focus, late 20s or 30, hair tucked back, slim glasses framing steady eyes that made panic look shy. She explained in that no-nonsense music good doctors have that I'd been found in my apartment in bad shape after a neighbor heard something off and got the building to open my door, body temperature at 41 Celsius, severe pneumonia, a brief shock, and that her timing mattered, that another hour could have meant a different story. I tried to answer and only managed a rasp. She pressed a water swab to my cracked lips with this practiced gentleness like she was returning something someone had stolen from me, and when she saw the panic flicker, she said, "You're safe. I've got you from here," which is the kind of sentence you don't know you've been waiting to hear until someone says it. The storm had followed me here. The window was a smeared painting of gray, but inside there was a vase on the sill with sunflowers, big and shamelessly bright, and Emily smiled a little at my confusion and said, "From me. Sunflowers chase the light. People can too," and it landed softly, like she wasn't preaching, just placing a compass on my chest. Over the next day and a half I drifted and climbed, fever breaking in slow, stubborn steps, and every time I surfaced, Emily was around in some way, checking the drip, arguing politely with a nurse to speed a lab, setting a bowl of plain congee on the tray with an apology that it wasn't gourmet, reminding me in that clinical but oddly warm cadence to breathe deeper. She didn't ask about the wreckage coming off me like smoke, and that restraint felt like respect, like she understood that some stories need you to choose the first word. Vanessa didn't come. My phone stayed quiet unless you counted pharmacy reminders and a spam offer for miracle credit repair. It made the decision simpler. When Emily finally signed the discharge and told me she'd drive me home because me plus rideshares plus lingering fever sounded like a bad algorithm, I didn't argue. Los Angeles had washed itself clean overnight, the streets mirror slick, and my apartment smelled faintly of soap because someone building staff, Emily, had opened a window and made the place less like a ghost mouth. She made sure the meds were by the sink, ran me through doses with a Sharpie on the box, and asked if I had anyone to check in on me. I told her yes and meant her. When she stepped into the doorway to leave, I heard my own voice say, "Dr. Lawson, Emma, can you help me with something else?" And the words tasted new and right even as they scared me, because I wasn't asking to be rescued, I was choosing to step out of a burning house. She turned back, eyebrows lifting in that ready-to-listen way, and I said, clear and simple, "I want a divorce," feeling something unclench in my ribs the moment I named it. She nodded like that was the bravest and most normal sentence she'd heard all day, said she knew a good attorney at Smith & Partners and she'd make the call, and for the first time in a long time I believed the next hour could be better than the last. That's how part one of this mess ends, me in a quiet room, rain finally easing, a stack of antibiotics on the counter, a neighbor doctor who knew when to fight and when to hold her tongue, and a decision that would slice my life cleanly into before and after. Tomorrow, there will be a law firm, a signature, and a face-off I've avoided for 3 years. But tonight, I'm going to sleep without waiting for a phone to ring, and if I dream, maybe it'll be of sunflowers turning toward a window, stubborn and a little ridiculous, but pointed exactly where the light is. The first time I saw Vanessa again after deciding to file for divorce wasn't in some quiet office or through a lawyer's letter. It was at St. Mary's Hospital, of all places, and I wasn't even there for her. I'd gone in for a follow-up, Emily walking beside me with that calm, measured pace of hers, running through my meds and reminding me about my next chest scan, when we rounded a corner and there she was, carefully holding onto the arm of Ryan Mitchell like he was a priceless vase she couldn't afford to drop, her head bent toward him. Her expression soft in a way I hadn't seen in years. He had one hand to his chest, wearing that pale, frail look he seemed to summon whenever he needed her undivided devotion, and for a second I thought maybe I'd hallucinated the whole thing because what were the odds, but then Ryan looked up, caught my eyes, and in that instant his expression flipped from mild surprise to something smug, taunting, like he'd just remembered an inside joke at my expense, and he actually tugged on her sleeve and said loud enough for me to hear, "Vanessa, look, it's Ethan Brooks," and she turned, saw me, and her whole body stiffened like I was a threat to be neutralized, pulling Ryan subtly behind her as if I might shove him into an oncoming gurney, and I just stood there with my discharge papers in hand, blood boiling, every unsaid accusation stacking up until it was too much. "What, hospitals are your private property now?" I shot back, my voice shaking but loud, "You can be here but I can't." "What's the matter? Is Ryan's precious health acting up again and only the official wife can spoon-feed him?" Her face went dark instantly, the edges of her voice sharp enough to cut. "Watch your mouth, Ethan. Ryan's just having some chest discomfort, I'm bringing him for a checkup." "Don't start your nonsense here," and that was it, the switch flipped, nonsense. I stepped forward, the words tumbling out, "Vanessa, for 3 years you've treated me like a backup generator only useful when you need light, otherwise ignored. Our wedding night. You left for him. Your birthday. You sent me out in the rain to bring him a cake. When I was burning up and could barely breathe, you hung up to stay with him. And now you stand there acting like I'm the one out of line." Heads were turning, nurses pretending not to eavesdrop, and Ryan, bless his manipulative little heart, shrank into her side with this practiced wounded look that made her grip him tighter, which only poured gasoline on my anger. "Enough, Ethan," she snapped, her voice carrying across the corridor. "Ryan is 1,000 times the man you'll ever be. At least he's kind. At least he doesn't parade around like some bitter ex-husband trying to score points," and that's when my knees almost gave because I was still not fully recovered, but before I could sway too far a firm, steady hand caught my shoulder and pulled me upright. Emily, appearing like she'd been waiting for her cue, her gaze locking onto Vanessa with a cold edge I hadn't seen before. "Vanessa, I suggest you watch your tone," she said. Not loud but with a weight that made the air change. "If I recall correctly, Ethan has already filed for divorce. The legal process is underway. You have no right to treat him like this in public. More importantly, if you're going to parade your lover around and insult your still legally married husband in a hospital hallway, maybe consider how that reflects on you." Vanessa blinked, caught between outrage and embarrassment, clearly not expecting Emily, the same Emily who'd handed her the divorce papers, to confront her head-on, and Ryan's face cycled through colors before landing on a shade that screamed, "I want to be anywhere else." Emily didn't wait for a rebuttal, she turned to me, her voice softening instantly. "Ethan, your prescriptions are ready. Let's get out of here, the air in here isn't worth breathing," and with that she steered me down the hallway, her hand warm and grounding on my back, not once looking back at the mess we left behind. That hospital run-in didn't just strengthen my resolve, it cemented it in concrete. The next week, when Attorney Smith emailed that the draft agreement was ready, I told her to set the earliest appointment possible. I wasn't interested in property, in savings, in any of the tangles that make divorces drag out for months. All I wanted was out, clean and quick. When the day came, Emily insisted on driving me to the Smith and Partners law firm in downtown LA, her car smelling faintly of eucalyptus from some travel-sized air freshener, the kind of detail that stuck with me because it felt intentional, like she'd considered that I might need something calming. We got there early, and I sat in the lobby flipping through the agreement one last time, every clause a reminder of how much I'd given up just to stop feeling like a placeholder in my own life. Vanessa arrived late, of course, sweeping in with that air of someone who thought punctuality was for people without leverage. She glanced at the changes me removal of any claims to shared assets, my insistence on no alimony, and let out a short, humorless laugh. "What's this, Ethan? Playing the noble victim now? Hoping I'll feel guilty?" "No," I said evenly, my voice so calm it startled even me, "I'm letting you go. And I'm letting myself go. There's nothing left here but mistakes. For a second, something flickered across her face, shock, maybe, or the realization that I wasn't going to give her the fight she could win, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a brisk, fine. As you wish. She signed with a flourish, the pen scratching across the page like the last nail in a coffin, and slid the document back to the lawyer, who double-checked every line before nodding. It's official as of now, Mr. Brooks. Your marriage is legally dissolved. I stood, thanked her, and didn't look at Vanessa again as I walked out into the daylight, where Emily was already parked at the curb, engine idling, eyes on me with that steady focus that felt like being seen in the best way. It's done, I told her, and she smiled, not a wide grin, but something real, tinged with relief. Good. Then let's get you home. But of course, nothing with Vanessa could end cleanly. She came striding out just as I reached Emily's car, her gaze flicking between us, and her mouth curled into a smirk. Well, that explains why you were in such a hurry to dump everything. You had the neighbor waiting in the wings. Emily Lawson, isn't it? Always so helpful. I felt my jaw tighten, but Emily beat me to it, stepping forward so that Vanessa had to tilt her chin up to meet her eyes. Vanessa, Ethan is no longer your concern in any way, legally or otherwise. And as for Maze, I'm helpful. I also have no intention of letting you or anyone else speak to him like that again. Ever. There was no raise in her voice, no dramatics, just this unwavering certainty that made Vanessa instinctively step back half an inch, and then Emily added, you had your chance, and you wasted it. Whatever you didn't value, I will, before holding the passenger door open for me and nodding toward the street. Now, please, leave. Vanessa's expression twisted, but she didn't say another word. She just turned on her heel and stalked off, her heels clicking sharp against the sidewalk until they faded into the noise of downtown traffic. As Emily slid behind the wheel and pulled away from the curb, I felt something inside me unclench for the first time in years. The papers were signed, the bridge burned, and the road ahead was wide open. That's when I realized this wasn't just the end of something broken, it was the start of something I hadn't dared to imagine yet. And Emily, hands steady on the steering wheel, was exactly the person I wanted to imagine it with. Moving out of Willow Creek Apartments felt like scraping off the last stubborn patch of a bad tattoo. Emily insisted on helping from start to finish, showing up in jeans, sneakers, and a ponytail that made her look years younger but no less in control, packing boxes with this efficient precision like she'd done it 100 times, wrapping fragile dishes in layer after layer of newspaper, labeling every carton with a Sharpie so big I'd never lose track of anything, and every time I tried to lift something heavy she'd shoot me this look over her glasses that said sit down or else. I watched her carry my coffee table like it weighed nothing, watched her check the straps on the mover's dolly like she was supervising surgery, and it hit me in the middle of stuffing books into a cretin. No one had ever fought this hard to make my life easier without asking for something back. Somewhere between the kitchen and the bedroom closet, I found the old college photo album I hadn't opened in years, dust puffing into the sunlight streaming through the half-empty room, and flipping through, I froze at a picture from the city debate finals, me in a white shirt, clutching a trophy, hair shorter, face sharper with ambition, and right there on the edge of the frame, half-hidden but smiling Emily, younger, softer, wearing a volunteer badge. Emily, look at this, I called, and she came over, wiped her hands on her jeans, peered at it, and her expression shifted into this mix of surprise and nostalgia. Yeah, that was my junior year. I was on the event staff. You were impossible to miss, confident, articulate, like you owned the room. I stood in the back watching you dismantle your opponent with logic so clean it was almost art. Afterward, you were swarmed with people wanting photos, so I just slipped in on the side, hoping I'd have this little proof I'd been there, she admitted, running her thumb lightly over the corner of the print like it was something fragile. I even asked around about you afterward, found out you were the year's top debater. But I was just another med student buried in anatomy notes, so I filed it away. Then years later, I saw your name in the hospital system and realized you were moving into the unit across from mine. The timing was too perfect to ignore, so I took the apartment. I figured, even if I was just a neighbor, I'd know you were safe. I didn't know what to say, a dozen sharp comebacks died in my throat because this wasn't banter, this was someone pulling the curtain back on a truth they'd guarded for years, and the way she said it, so matter of fact, without demanding anything from me, made my chest ache in a way that wasn't entirely unpleasant. "Emily," I started, but she shook her head with a small smile. "Don't feel pressured to respond. I'm not telling you this for payback. I just think you should know that you've always been worth showing up for. And I plan to keep showing up this time, not as a neighbor, but as someone who wants to be in your life." I swallowed hard, closed the album, and slid it into the keep box like it was worth more than the furniture, because maybe it was. The new place was brighter, quieter, with windows that actually caught the afternoon sun instead of staring into another building's brick wall, and Emily made sure the first night didn't feel like a restart button slapped on a broken console. She stocked my fridge with basics, set a small bouquet of sunflowers on the counter, always sunflowers with her, and when she left, it was with a promise she'd be back in a day or two to check on me. That promise came sooner than expected. The next evening, the doorbell rang, and there she was holding a stainless steel thermos, her hair slightly windblown from the Riverside Wetland Park breeze, yam and pork rib soup. Good for the stomach. "I was passing by," she said, like passing by, didn't mean driving across half of Los Angeles traffic. I took it, feeling the heat seep through the metal into my palms, and some part of me compared it instantly to Vanessa's years of indifference, how meals with her were more about criticism than care, how she'd never once brought me anything without a complaint attached. "Passing by, huh?" I teased, leaning against the doorframe, "from the East End to here? That's some scenic route." Emily adjusted her glasses, the tips of her ears coloring faintly. "Had a meeting near the community clinic. And besides, the view from your balcony is perfect for thinking through complex cases," she replied with a straight face that almost sold the line. "Almost. Cases, huh? Not checking on whether I'm eating?" I pressed, grinning, and she finally cracked, a small laugh slipping out. "Both. Now go eat before it cools." Nights blurred into weekends, and somewhere in between, I started talking about work again, small victories, stubborn deadlines, and she listened like each update was a plot twist in a story she'd been following since page 1. On a slow Sunday, she suggested we get out of the apartment, take a walk through Riverside Wetland Park, and I agreed before remembering I hadn't been there since before the marriage, back when free time was still a thing. The place was as I remembered, winding paths, filtered light through trees, the air cleaner than anywhere else in the city, and walking beside her, matching pace without trying, felt easy. She asked if I was settling into the new job, and when I told her about a project my supervisor had actually praised after making me redo the pitch deck 8 times, her laugh was warm and low. "That's practically a standing ovation from a guy like that. I told you, your designs have something other people can't fake. You just need room to show it." I tried to play it cool, but I probably grinned like a kid anyway. We talked about the online design course I'd been struggling with, about how the 3D modeling software felt like a maze built to mock me, and she stopped mid-path, turned toward me. "Explain where you're getting stuck." "I might not be a designer, but I'm good at breaking down problems. Humor me." So we ended up pacing under the shade, me gesturing wildly about mesh layering and viewport glitches while she asked questions that actually made me think about the process differently, and the whole time she had this focused look like my words were worth the effort of decoding. By the time we looped back to the car, I realized I'd just spent 2 hours talking without once bracing for the impatience I'd grown used to from Vanessa. That night, coming back late from the office, I found the hallway light dead and the building's motion sensor useless. I was fishing for my phone flashlight when a beam cut through the dark from the opposite side. Emily, in a hoodie and pajama pants, holding a compact flashlight like it was a natural extension of her hand. "Scared you?" she asked when I froze, and I blurted, "What are you doing here?" before realizing how dumb it sounded. "I live here now," she said simply, and my brain stalled. "Wait, what? You bought the unit next door?" She smiled like she'd just revealed a magician's trick. "It went on sale." I thought, why not? Closer commute. I was still processing the words when she nodded toward the door. "Go on, unlock it. I'll hold the light." The key slid home easily, the lock turning with a click, and that's when I noticed the insulated bag at her feet, labeled in her careful handwriting, "Red Date Millet Porridge Warm." "You didn't have to," I started, but she cut me off gently. "I wanted to." I took it, the heat soaking into my hands, and before I could overthink it, I asked, "So tomorrow?" Her pause was just long enough to make my pulse jump. "Then, tomorrow," she said, and for the first time in years, I went inside with the kind of anticipation that made the walls feel less like shelter and more like home. Friday nights used to mean nothing but noise in my head, unfinished work, the ghost of old arguments, the kind of quiet that made you feel like you'd forgotten something important, but this one was different. Emily had texted earlier saying her department at St. Mary's had an unusually light day and she wanted to celebrate my project launch, so by the time she pulled up outside my place, the city was cooling into that soft twilight that makes everything look like a movie set, and she led me to this small place on the edge of downtown, not flashy but warm, candles flickering in mason jars, the air rich with garlic and fresh herbs. We ordered wine. She teased me about my tendency to overanalyze menus, and halfway through a story about her med school days, she reached under the table, pulled out a bouquet of deep red roses, and set them in front of me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "From the first time I saw you at that debate years ago, you've been a light in my life," she said, voice steady but softer than usual, "and after all the storms, seeing you fight to stand back up, seeing you start over, it's made me want to be right here, to be part of it. Ethan, I love you. Not because I pity you, not because it's convenient, but because over time I've learned you're exactly the person I want to protect, to encourage, to share my life with. Every time I just happen to show up, every time I'm passing by, it's because walking toward you is the only route I care about." The table between us felt smaller, the rest of the restaurant fading into a blur of clinking glasses and muted chatter, and I could feel my throat tightening, the weight of all the years I'd gone without hearing something like that pressing against the relief of finally hearing it. I laughed once, sharp and disbelieving, and then the heat behind my eyes broke, tears blurring her face as I nodded hard enough to make the roses tremble. "Yeah," I managed, voice cracking, "yeah, I want that too. I want you." She smiled like she'd been holding her breath for months, then stood and leaned across the table to pull me into a hug that fit like we'd been rehearsing it for years. Somewhere in the background I heard applause from another table, a couple of people laughing quietly, but all I could focus on was the feel of her heartbeat against mine and the realization that I wasn't carrying my life alone anymore. From that night on, things shifted in ways I didn't expect, not overnight fireworks, but the slow, steady layering of comfort. Sunday mornings meant coffee on my balcony, her legs tucked under her while she read case notes and I sketched ideas. Evenings meant grocery runs that turned into debates over pasta shapes. And more often than not she'd bring something small but intentional, like the time she showed up with a set of better kitchen knives because she'd noticed me struggling with the dull ones I'd had since college. It wasn't perfect, I still caught myself flinching at shadows of Vanessa in my habits, like hesitating before sharing good news or downplaying small victories, but Emily never pushed, just listen, maybe squeeze my hand, and keep showing up. Meanwhile, news about Vanessa started leaking in without me even trying to look for it. One afternoon at Maple Brew Coffee House, Emily and I were leaning over my laptop discussing a new design mock-up when two men at the next table mentioned her name. I tried to ignore it, but their conversation carried. "Vanessa Carter's been having a rough time," one said. "Didn't she just get her dream guy, that Ryan Mitchell?" The other snorted, "Yeah, but apparently dream guy can't boil water. She's gone through, like, a dozen housekeepers, nobody wants to stick around. Heard she's living off takeout and canned soup half the time. And when she got sick last month." He handed her an instant oatmeal cup and went back to bed. My coffee went cold in my hand, not because I felt vindicated, there was no triumph in hearing someone else's misery, but because it was the exact mirror image of the life she'd rejected, the home-cooked meals, the care when she was sick, the quiet partnership. I let the voices fade into the background and focused back on Emily, who caught my eye and didn't ask, just gave me that small, knowing look that said she trusted me to decide whether the past got any more of my attention. Weeks later, little ripples turned into bigger waves. TG Corporation, her family's company, hit the financial news for all the wrong reasons: cash flow issues, delays on major projects, and a trickle of gossip turned into a steady stream. I didn't dig, but what I heard painted a familiar picture. Ryan wanting something extravagant, a rare antique painting, this time Vanessa hesitating because of the company's finances, Ryan accusing her of not loving him enough to support his interests, then storming out to stay in a hotel until she caved. He got the painting, the company sank further. The implosion came fast after that. One weekend, Emily and I were leaving Grandview Mall with grocery bags when raised voices cut through the hum of evening shoppers. Across the plaza, Vanessa stood gripping Ryan's arm, her hair disheveled, voice breaking as she demanded, "Where's the money, Ryan? The accounts are empty, suppliers are calling non-stop, what did you do?" Ryan yanked free, his face hard and cold in a way I'd never seen. "That was my allowance, Vanessa. You gave me those documents. If you ran the company into the ground, that's on you." Her voice climbed into something raw, desperate. "I gave you everything. How could you, because all you ever had was money," he snapped. "You're boring, controlling, and you didn't even know how good you had it when you were with Ethan." The words hit her like a physical blow. She swayed, knees buckling, and in front of a growing crowd she dropped to the ground, clutching at his leg, sobbing, begging him not to leave. He pried her off like she was something that might stain, muttered, "Pathetic," and walked straight to a waiting sports car without looking back. I stood there, grocery bag straps cutting into my fingers, watching a woman who had once stood so high above me kneel on cold tile for a man who couldn't be bothered to fake decency, and I felt nothing. Not joy, not even closure, just the final, irreversible absence of whatever tie had once existed. Emily's hand found mine, squeezing once before guiding me toward the parking garage. "Don't let it stick," she said quietly, and I nodded, leaving Vanessa where she was, because whatever story she was in now, it wasn't mine anymore. The collapse of TG Corporation happened faster than anyone expected, splashed across the business section like a cautionary tale, assets frozen, property seized, and every luxury Vanessa had surrounded herself with stripped away in a matter of weeks. Emily mentioned it one evening in passing while chopping vegetables for dinner, her tone neutral. "She's not doing well. Rumor is she's renting some rundown place out near Edgewood now," and I just shrugged, because I didn't need the details, but they came anyway, trickling in from mutual acquaintances who couldn't resist gossip. "She'd been drinking too much, spending days shut in, ignoring calls from creditors, the kind of spiral you can't disguise with makeup and designer clothes." Then came the gut punch of a different kind of news, this time from Emily's own department at St. Mary's. "Ethan," she said one afternoon, her voice carrying that careful weight she used when she didn't want to blindside me, "Vanessa's in the oncology ward. Stage 4 stomach cancer, metastasized. She checked herself in after collapsing from internal bleeding. I thought you'd want to know." I sat there, fingers drumming against my coffee mug, the past few years flashing in fragments, the rain, the smashed cake, the click of a call ending while I begged for help and wondered what the hell I was supposed to feel. A few days later, the inevitable happened. My phone lit up with an unfamiliar number, and when I answered, her voice was there, ragged and almost unrecognizable. "Ethan, I'm so sorry," she started, the words tumbling out between sobs. "Ryan left me, the company's gone, I'm dying, and I can't stop thinking about you. About how you used to take care of me. The soup when I was sick, the way you'd remember how I liked my food. I didn't know how good I had it." She was crying so hard I could hear the rattle of her breath through the line, and I realized she wasn't asking for forgiveness, she was asking for a reprieve from the loneliness that had finally caught up to her. I let her finish, my own silence loud in the space between us, then said evenly, "Vanessa, that's not my life anymore. I have someone who shows up for me every day, someone I love and who loves me back. You made your choice. Live with it, what's left of it." I hung up before she could answer, the click of the line cutting cleaner than I'd expected. Weeks passed, and the next call wasn't from her but from a hospice nurse at St. Mary's, informing me that Vanessa had died that morning at 6:15 from multiple organ failure. The nurse hesitated, then added quietly, "In her final hours she seemed angry. She cried for you a few times, mentioned something about a cake. But mostly she cursed Ryan. Over and over." I stood at the window, watching a fine mist of rain drift across the street, and felt nothing sharp, nothing bitter. Just a cool, steady emptiness, like the closing of a book you'd finished long ago but left open on the table. I turned from the glass and there was Emily, hair damp from the drizzle, holding a bag of fresh vegetables in one hand and a whole fish in the other, smiling softly like she could read the storm I wasn't showing. Fish stew tonight. It'll warm you up. Perfect, I said, and meant it, because the past was already receding behind me like a shoreline I'd sailed away from for good. The kitchen filled with the sound of running water, the rhythmic chop of her knife against the board, and the smell of ginger and white pepper rising with the steam. I washed the greens, she stirred the pot, and every so often our hands would brush in the small space between us, each touch a quiet reminder of how far I'd come. In the glow of the stove light, with the soft hiss of broth and the hum of our voices trading small, ordinary details about the day, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building something new, something steady, something mine. The woman across from me wasn't a rescuer or a rebound, she was a partner, and in the gentle cadence of our shared space, the future finally felt like it was arriving. Life with Emily settled into a rhythm that was so natural I sometimes forgot how much noise used to fill my days. Morning started with the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen while I was still half buried in the covers, her hair pulled back, reading case notes on her tablet as she sipped from the mug I'd bought her, dark blue ceramic with a tiny sunflower on the side, and evenings ended with us cooking together, sharing the kind of casual intimacy that didn't need grand gestures because the consistency itself was the gesture. I'd catch her humming under her breath while chopping vegetables, or she'd glance over my shoulder at my laptop and offer a small, genuine, "that looks great," at a design I'd been second-guessing for hours, and it hit me that these were the moments I used to think only existed for other people. One Friday, she texted to ask if I was free for dinner, which made me laugh because by now we'd had enough dinners together that asking felt like formality, but when I opened the door that evening she was standing there in a soft gray sweater, holding takeout from a place I'd once mentioned missing back in college, and behind her, the city was lit up in the kind of gold that makes you think the world might be trying to apologize for all the rain. We ate on the balcony, watching the sky turn from peach to deep violet, and somewhere between the last bite and the first sip of wine she leaned back, looking at me with that steady, unflinching gaze of hers. "Ethan, you know I meant it when I said I was in this for the long haul, right?" I nodded, and instead of answering with words I reached over and took her hand, because there are some things you can only say with the way your fingers fit between someone else's. Weekends became our excuse to explore Riverside Wetland Park when we wanted quiet, Grandview Mall when I needed to pretend I cared about replacing my worn-out sneakers, and sometimes just aimless drives with the windows down, music low, and the kind of comfortable silence that lets you hear your own heartbeat. She had this habit of stopping to photograph small, unnoticed things, a cracked sidewalk with weeds pushing through, a street lamp haloed in fog, and I started to realize she looked at people the same way, noticing the details they thought were invisible. One night after a late shift, she showed up with a bag from the 24-hour bakery downtown, 2 warm croissants and a sheepish smile, saying she'd passed by and thought of me, and I couldn't help thinking how different that was from the years I'd spent waiting for someone who only thought of me when I was convenient. I didn't tell her that though some comparisons are better left unspoken, their weight absorbed into gratitude instead of resentment. Months slipped by like that, a blend of work deadlines and shared dinners, and the scars from before stopped feeling like open wounds, more like faded lines you could trace without flinching. One evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner, I caught her watching me with that same expression she'd had the night she confessed at the restaurant, and before I could ask what she was thinking she said, "You've changed, you know. Not in a bad way, more like you've started taking up space again in your own life." I didn't answer right away, just dried my hands and crossed the kitchen to kiss her, because she was right, and part of the reason I could was standing right in front of me. The last remnants of Vanessa's shadow were gone now, not erased but irrelevant, and in their place was this steady warmth I didn't have to fight for. On a quiet Sunday morning, we made pancakes, and while I was flipping the last one she reached into her bag, pulled out a small box, and slid it across the counter. Inside was a simple silver key with a sunflower charm, and she said, "Figured we might as well make it official. No more knocking." I laughed, took it, and hooked it onto my keychain without hesitation, because it didn't feel like giving something up, it felt like adding another anchor, Later that day, as we sat on the couch with her legs draped over mine, sunlight pooling across the floor, I realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about the past or bracing for the future. I was here, in the middle of something good, with someone who saw me and stayed, and that was enough, maybe more than enough it was. Exactly what I'd been missing all along.